It was a hot afternoon in Phoenix. The crowd was loud. Patriotic music played through the speakers. Signs waved. Slogans echoed. Donald Trump stood on stage, pointing to his favorite line, "We are the real America." Applause. Cheers. Flags. Then, unexpectedly, something changed. A woman in a blue blazer rose quietly near the back. At first no one noticed, but a staffer by the stage leaned in and whispered into the mic on the president's lapel. "She's not on the list," the voice said. Trump looked across the audience, narrowed his eyes, and offered a smirk, the kind that signals a challenge rather than warmth. "Oh, look," he said into the microphone. "A visitor from the other side of the aisle. Here to take notes, sweetheart." The audience laughed. A few phones emerged, but the woman did not smile or flinch. She stepped forward calmly. No security badge, no name tag, just Jasmine Crockett, congresswoman, lawyer, uninvited guest. Trump cocked his head. "Do you want to say something, darling? I'll give you 30 seconds. More laughter. Jasmine didn't reach for the mic or approach the stage. She turned to the crowd and said plainly, "I didn't come to steal the spotlight. I came to ask a question." Silence fell. Security began to move. One man touched his earpiece. Another advanced, but Trump raised a hand. "Let her speak. Might be fun." Jasmine did not smile or raise her voice. She didn't seek applause. She scanned the room and asked, "How many of you lost someone during Hurricane Harvey?" A few heads turned, brows furrowed. She continued, voice steady. "How many of you are still waiting for help that was promised but never came?" The room grew truly quiet. No camera flashes. No clapping. This was not a campaign line or a staged protest. It was a question that cut through the noise. People glanced at each other, uncertain. A woman clutched her purse. A man in a red cap folded his arms. Trump shifted behind the podium, opened his mouth, but this was no longer about rhetoric. It was about memory, about loss, about promises left unmet. She had spoken it aloud. Accountability. Jasmine didn't move toward the stage or look at Trump. She faced the audience and spoke again. No microphone, no raised voice, just conviction. "I didn't come here to perform," she said. "I came to ask a question." The words landed heavily. Trump blinked, slightly off guard, and leaned back as if amused. Security pushed forward. Two men in black suits weaving through the aisles, one hand near a belt, waiting. Trump chuckled and raised a hand. "Nah," he said into the mic, smiling. "Let her talk. Give her 30 seconds. Let's have a little entertainment." The crowd tensed. Some laughed, many did not. A few phones recorded, but Jasmine remained still, feet planted as if she belonged there despite not being invited. "I'm not here for entertainment," she said. "I'm here because someone needs to ask what happened." Trump shrugged, indicating she wasn't a threat. Yet the atmosphere shifted. People stopped looking at him and began to look at her. Not because she raised her voice or because she was famous, but because she stood firm. In a room designed for noise and applause, that stillness became louder than any microphone. The first guard hesitated and said softly, "Ma'am, we need to escort you." She turned her head just enough to reply, "Calm. Even if I leave without asking, they'll never hear the answer." He did not push her. He did not seize her arm. There was something in her tone that signaled the moment mattered. Trump leaned into the podium, attempting to reclaim the audience. "All right then," he said lightly. "Ask your question. Just make it quick. We've got a country to save." Jasmine did not respond directly. She looked over the room, working-class families, veterans, small business owners, parents, retirees, and nodded once. Then with measured clarity she said, "Let's talk about what was promised and what was never delivered." In that instant, 30 seconds did not feel like a favor. It felt like the start of something no one there could ignore. She didn't advance, seek a mic, or invite applause. She simply asked again, "How many of you lost someone during Hurricane Harvey?" There was no anger, only a blunt truth that was harder for that audience to ignore. "How many of you are still waiting for help that was promised but never came?" Silence followed, not ceremonial, but frozen. The kind that appears when someone finally asks the question everyone avoided. A man in the third row lowered his phone. A woman stopped waving her flag. Two teenagers exchanged looks but remained quiet. Jasmine stayed steady. Her eyes moved across the crowd not in search of confrontation but for recognition. The kind that comes when people realize the account is real. Trump adjusted the microphone and cleared his throat, but she continued. "I'm not here to argue," she said. "I'm here because too many people in this room have been told their pain is politics." Heads turned, gestures shifted subtly, fingers tapping, postures changing, eyebrows knitting. Something genuine was stirring beneath the surface. She did not name individuals or assign blame. She let the questions sit. In a room built for spectacle, the lack of a punchline hit hardest. "I know this isn't where I'm supposed to be," Jasmine said, voice softer now. "But if this room truly believes in America, then we should all be asking the same thing." She held the pause like a litigator before a closing. For a moment, her eyes met Trump's. She did not glare or sneer, she simply looked. In that look were the unspoken things. A question he preferred not to face, a memory some hoped had faded, a truth that had not been meant to walk into that room alone. Say it aloud. And there it was. Now everyone waited to see what would follow. Jasmine reached into her blazer pocket, deliberate, not rushed, not theatrical. And from that pocket, she took out a single folded sheet. No folder, no seal. Just a worn, creased page that looked like it had been handled many times. She raised it, not for show, not for effect, only high enough for the front row to see. "This," she said, "is a federal emergency budget report from 2020. Her tone stayed steady. It described a $47 million allocation intended for hurricane relief in Texas. She paused, then added that the funds never reached their destination. A quiet wave moved through the audience. She unfolded the paper slowly. No added commentary, no extra detail. Just the fact that the money was unaccounted for. Then she turned to the last page. At the bottom, where the authorization signature should have been, there were only faint initials, barely readable, without a name or title. She held it up again, then looked at the crowd and asked, "Who signed this?" No one responded. "Who reviewed it?" she added with a small nod. Meanwhile, people were drowning, families were sleeping in shelters, and children waited for aid that never arrived. No shouting, no accusations. Just a question carrying the weight of those who couldn't ask it themselves. In that moment, the document represented more than figures. It represented lives. For a moment, it seemed Trump might respond. He stepped forward, gripped the podium, cleared his throat like he was preparing to lighten the moment or regain the room. But nothing followed, because the silence had taken hold first. It wasn't awkward or confused. It was intentional, the kind of stillness that settles when people are actually thinking. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't blink or shift. She simply stood there, holding the paper. Then a voice rose. Not hers. A man in the front row wearing a red baseball cap leaned forward and said calmly, "She's right." Heads turned. He nodded once. "I was in Houston that year. I remember the flood. We didn't get anything." His voice wavered slightly, like someone revisiting a memory they'd rather avoid. Another murmur passed through the crowd. Not defensive, not angry. Just uncertain. Something was shifting, and no one wanted to acknowledge it first. Trump leaned back from the microphone, scanning the room as if waiting for someone to break the moment, laugh it off, or redirect the tension. No one did. A few seats over, a woman slowly lowered her campaign sign into her lap. On the left side, a veteran in uniform watched Jasmine, not with hostility, but with genuine curiosity. And at the back, the cameras that had been focused on Trump had turned toward her. She remained still, composed. No smiling, no self-satisfaction. Because this wasn't about winning a point, it was about addressing what had been overlooked. In that moment, the rally no longer felt like a rally. It resembled a courtroom, not with a judge, but with a witness and an audience acting as jurors. And everyone was listening. Jasmine didn't wait for approval. She didn't wave or gesture for attention. She simply turned and walked out. No one stopped her. Not the security team, not the staff, not even Trump. Because even he understood that nothing he said could outweigh what had already been said. As she moved toward the exit, the silence trailed behind her. Then, somewhere in the middle of the crowd, came the sound of a single clap. Then another. Slow, spaced, unsure, like people weren't certain if they should react, but felt compelled to. It wasn't applause for a performance or rebellion. It was acknowledgement, a quiet recognition that someone had finally entered the room not to speak over them, but to speak to them, to voice what many had felt for years but didn't know how to express. And as she stepped outside into the dry Arizona air, the moment didn't end. It expanded. Cameras captured everything. Phones buzzed as clips uploaded. Images of her holding the document, Trump's still expression, the man in the red hat, all spread quickly. Within an hour, headlines appeared everywhere. One question, one room, one silence no one expected. But the real shift wasn't in the news. It was in the comments, the texts, the quiet talks in homes. People didn't debate party lines that night. They didn't argue about loyalty or blame. They asked the same question Jasmine had asked. Who signed it? And then came deeper questions, spoken differently in different places. If they overlooked us during the flood, what else has been ignored while we weren't watching? Because this wasn't only about $47 million. It wasn't just about Hurricane Harvey. It was about everything that disappeared into bureaucratic shadows. Pain minimized by headlines, signatures with no accountability. Jasmine hadn't brought outrage. She brought something far more challenging for systems built on silence. A mirror. And when she asked her question, she wasn't aiming for applause. She was making sure the people who had been forgotten were finally seen. Not as statistics, not as footnotes, but as individuals whose experiences deserved answers. When a reporter later asked why she attended the rally without an invitation, she replied simply, "I didn't want to speak, but I couldn't stay silent." That line became a message, a poster, a quiet current moving through community gatherings. In a country overwhelmed by noise, the voice that didn't rise became the one that remained. And sometimes, all it takes is one woman standing still to remind a room that truth doesn't need volume. It needs someone willing to say, "I'm not here to perform. I'm here to ask what you hoped no one would." And that is when silence finally speaks.